The exam hall was quiet except for the soft hum of holographic displays. Jiho sat at his desk in the back row, watching a three-dimensional image of a purple plant rotate slowly in the air above his workspace. The plant had sharp thorns and leaves that dripped with something oily and green. It looked dangerous, very dangerous. Around him, students from different worlds worked on their tests. To his left sat a tall Orthan student whose body looked like it was made of crystal. Light passed through her and made rainbow colors on the desk. In front of him, a Vrin student used 4 of his 6 arms to take notes while the other 2 held his water container. Everyone was focused and serious. Jiho had been at the Intergalactic Xenobiology Institute for 6 months now. He was one of only 3 humans in the entire school. Getting accepted had been hard. Thousands of humans applied, but only 3 got scholarships. Jiho still remembered the day he received his acceptance message. His parents had cried with joy. The institute was a massive space station that floated in orbit around a neutral planet. It had students from 40 different species, all learning about alien life, planets, and biology. The goal was to prepare them for jobs exploring new worlds, helping with terraforming projects, or working in diplomatic services between different alien races. Professor Velk walked slowly between the rows of desks. He was an Orthan, which meant his body was crystalline and changed colors based on his mood. Right now, he was a calm blue color, which meant he was relaxed. Jiho had learned to read these color changes over the past few months. Blue was good. Red meant angry. Orange meant confused. And when Professor Velk stopped making colors altogether, that meant he was shocked. The test was for Advanced Toxic Botany, a class about poisonous plants from across the galaxy. Jiho actually enjoyed this class. Plants were interesting, and many of them had useful properties if you knew how to handle them correctly. The exam had 50 questions. Each question showed a different plant, and students had to identify the poison, explain how dangerous it was, and describe what to do if someone was exposed to it. Jiho had finished the first 40 questions easily. They were straightforward. Question 15 had been about a plant from the Kelvin system that produced spores causing temporary blindness. Question 23 was about a vine that secreted acid strong enough to burn through metal. Question 31 showed a flower whose pollen caused immediate respiratory failure in most carbon-based life forms. Simple stuff, really. Identify, explain, provide safety protocols. Jiho wrote his answers quickly and confidently, but then he reached question 47 and he paused. The plant on his screen looked familiar somehow. Not the exact species, but the structure was similar to something from Earth. The thorns reminded him of certain cacti. The oily secretion had a molecular structure that looked a lot like capsaicin, the chemical that made peppers spicy. His grandmother grew peppers in her garden back home. Some of them were so spicy that his eyes watered just from cutting them. Jiho looked at the next few questions. Question 48 showed a plant with alkaloids similar to those found in potatoes. Question 49 had compounds like the ones in bitter almonds. Question 50 displayed something that looked remarkably similar to cassava root. He frowned and raised his hand. Professor Velk noticed immediately. The professor's blue color shifted slightly toward purple, which meant curiosity mixed with mild concern. He walked over to Jiho's desk, his crystalline feet making soft clicking sounds on the floor. "Yes, student Jiho?" Professor Velk's voice came through the universal translator everyone wore. "Is there a problem with your exam display?" "No, sir. The display is working fine," Jiho said politely. "I just need some clarification on these last few questions." "The parameters are clearly stated in the exam instructions," Professor Velk replied. His color shifted slightly toward orange. Confusion. "I understand, sir," Jiho continued, "but I need to know which context you want for my answers. Are we evaluating these plants for edible preparation or for military application?" The room became completely silent. Every student stopped working and looked up. The Orthan student next to Jiho stopped glowing entirely, which Jiho knew meant shock. The Vrin student in front dropped his stylus and it clattered on the desk. Professor Velk's entire body stopped producing colors. He became completely clear, like glass. Jiho had never seen this happen before. It took the professor several seconds to respond. What did you just say?" Professor Velk asked slowly. Jiho wondered if maybe his translator had malfunctioned. He spoke again, more clearly this time. I need clarification, sir. Which framework should I use? Several of these plants have compounds that humans eat regularly after proper preparation. Some of the others have obvious military or pharmaceutical applications. I just need to know which angle you want for the assessment. 3 rows ahead, Sora, another human student, made a small groaning sound and put her head down on her desk. Jiho saw Taeyang, the third human, close his eyes and shake his head slowly. Professor Velk moved closer to Jiho's desk, walking carefully, like someone approaching a wild animal. Student Jiho, are you telling me that your species consumes these toxins? Well, yes, sir, Jiho said, pulling up his datapad to show his notes. This one here, question 47, has a chemical structure similar to capsaicin. That's what makes chili peppers spicy. Humans have been eating peppers for thousands of years. Some people eat them in competitions. My uncle has a hot sauce collection with over 50 bottles, and some of them are incredibly concentrated. Spicy? A telepathic voice appeared in Jiho's head. It was Nara, the Keelar student, who sat beside him. The Keelar were telepathic, and Nara had become something like a friend over the past months. Her mental voice felt confused and alarmed. You eat things that cause pain? For fun? I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds strange, Jiho admitted. Professor Velk's colors started changing rapidly, cycling through orange, red, yellow, and purple all at once. Jiho had never seen this before, but it looked bad. The professor seemed to be breathing heavily, though orthans didn't actually breathe the way humans did. And the military applications you mentioned? Professor Velk's voice had gotten higher and more stressed. Jiho scrolled through his exam answers. Sure. Question 12 has an alkaloid structure similar to atropine. We've used that in warfare for centuries and also in medical applications. Question 23 is basically a paralytic agent. The molecular structure is almost identical to compounds that some human tribes used on their hunting darts thousands of years ago. And question 8 could probably be synthesized into a nerve agent, though obviously there are serious ethical issues with doing that. Ethical issues? Professor Velk's voice cracked, and his translator briefly stopped working, producing a high-pitched squealing sound. You are discussing how to weaponize examination materials, and your primary concern is ethics? The other students were all staring now. Several had started recording the conversation with their devices. Jiho saw at least 5 different species leaning forward to hear better. The Queelar students were probably sharing the conversation telepathically with each other. Sora stood up quickly from her desk. Professor Velk, sir, I think there's been a cultural misunderstanding here. If I could just explain, but Professor Velk wasn't listening. He reached for the emergency communicator on his wrist and pressed it firmly. A bright yellow light began flashing above the exam hall entrance. Security to exam hall 7, Professor Velk said into the communicator. His voice was shaking slightly. And someone alert the academic council. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Jiho sat very still, his datapad still open on his lap. He looked at Sora, then at Taeyang, confusion clear on his face. What did I say wrong? He asked quietly. Nara's telepathic voice touched his mind again, softer this time, almost gentle. Everything, Jiho, you said everything wrong. Within 10 minutes, the exam hall had been cleared. All the non-human students were escorted out by security personnel, though most of them kept looking back at Jiho with expressions that ranged from fear to intense curiosity. The 3 human students were told to wait together, in a corner of the room while Professor Velk spoke urgently with several administrators who had arrived quickly after his emergency call. Jiho sat between Sora and Taeyang on a bench near the back wall. Sora had her face in her hands. Taeyang kept running his fingers through his hair, a nervous habit he had when stressed. I really messed up, didn't I? Jiho said quietly, you think? Sora replied, her voice muffled by her hands. Jiho, we've talked about this. We had 3 whole orientation sessions about not mentioning certain aspects of human culture. I know, but I thought that was about things like persistence hunting and alcohol consumption. Jiho protested. Nobody said anything about not mentioning food. Food that is literally poisonous to every other known species, Taeyang pointed out. Food that you then immediately connected to military weapons. In front of 40 witnesses, Jiho slumped lower on the bench. My grandmother is going to be so disappointed. Across the room, Professor Velk was showing something on a datapad to a group of concerned-looking administrators. Jiho could see colorful charts and graphs, probably data about human biology and dietary habits. Every few seconds, one of the administrators would make an alarm gesture or change color dramatically. A door opened, and a human woman in formal diplomatic attire rushed into the room. She looked harried and exhausted. Jiho recognized her immediately. It was Hana, the human diplomatic liaison assigned to the Institute. Her job was to smooth over cultural misunderstandings and help alien species understand human behavior. She had been very busy over the past 6 months. Hana walked quickly over to the 3 students. She stood in front of them with her arms crossed, looking down with an expression that reminded Jiho of his mother, when he had done something particularly foolish. "Okay," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Which one of you was it this time?" "Jiho," Sora and Taeyang said simultaneously, pointing at him. "What did you do?" Hana asked, sitting down next to them. Jiho explained what had happened during the exam. As he talked, he watched Hana's expression change from confusion to understanding to resignation. "Capsaicin," she repeated after he finished. "You brought up capsaicin. It was relevant to the question," Jiho said defensively. "And then you mentioned weaponization, also relevant, and nerve agents. I specifically said there were ethical concerns about that part." Hana closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Jiho, do you remember last month when a student asked why humans drink alcohol?" "Yes. And do you remember how that question led to a 3-day seminar where I had to explain to horrified alien professors that humans regularly consume a substance that is literally poisonous to our own cells, damages our liver and brain, impairs our judgment, and can kill us in high doses?" "I remember," Jiho said quietly. "And do you remember how, after that seminar, several species filed formal requests to have humans undergo psychological evaluation because they couldn't understand why any intelligent species would voluntarily poison themselves for recreational purposes?" "Yes." "Now imagine that conversation," Hana continued. "But instead of just alcohol, it's about dozens of poisonous plants that we've been eating for thousands of years. And instead of just consumption, you've also added military weapons and nerve agents to the mix." Jiho was quiet for a moment. "When you explain it like that, I can see how it might sound concerning." "Concerning," Taeyang muttered. "That's one word for it." Professor Velk and the administrators finished their conversation and walked over to where the humans sat. The professor's colors were still cycling through agitated patterns. Behind him stood Chancellor Pren, the head of the academic council. She was of Rin, which meant she had 6 arms and compound eyes that could see in multiple directions at once. Right now, all of those eyes were focused on Jiho. "Student Jiho," Chancellor Pren said, her voice coming through the translator in calm, measured tones. "You will need to come with us. The academic council has called an emergency session." "What about Sora and Taeyang?" Jiho asked. "They didn't do anything. All 3 human students must attend," the Chancellor replied, "and Liaison Hana as well. This is not a punishment hearing yet. It is an inquiry into human biology and cultural practices as they relate to potential security concerns." "Security concerns?" Jiho stood up slowly. "I was just answering exam questions." "Questions about toxic substances that you claim your species consumes and weaponizes," Professor Velk said. His colors had settled into a dark orange now. "The council needs to understand whether this represents a threat to other students and staff." "We're not a threat," Sora said firmly, standing as well. "We've been here for 6 months without any incidents." "What do you call the persistence hunting lecture?" asked one of the administrators, a Quilar with pale blue skin. "Or the alcohol symposium," added another. "Or when Taeyang explained human history of animal domestication and 3 students fainted," said a third. Taeyang raised his hand weakly. "In my defense, I didn't know that other species find the concept of forcing wolves to become dogs terrifying. I thought it was a nice story about friendship." Chancellor Pren held up one of her 6 hands for silence. "Regardless of past incidents, this situation requires formal review. The council chamber has been prepared. Please follow me." The group walked through the institute's corridors. Jiho noticed that other students stopped and stared as they passed. Word had clearly spread. He heard whispers in various languages, though his translator only picked up fragments. Said they eat poison, weapons. From plants, humans are death-worlders after all. The council chamber was a large circular room with seats arranged in a ring around a central platform. Representatives from 20 different species sat in those seats, all of them looking down at the central area where Jiho, Sora, Taiyang, and Hana were directed to stand. The architecture was designed to be intimidating, and it worked. Jiho felt very small standing in the center of that room with dozens of alien eyes watching him. Some of those eyes were compound, some were stalked, some glowed with internal light. All of them looked concerned or suspicious or both. Chancellor Pren took her seat at the highest point in the circle. She activated a holographic display that showed Professor Velk's report, complete with recordings of Jiho's statements during the exam. This council is convened to address concerns raised by Professor Velk regarding human students, specifically student Jiho, and their knowledge of toxic botanical substances. The concern is that humans may possess dangerous knowledge that could threaten the safety of this institute and the wider galactic community. She looked directly at Jiho. Before we review the evidence, do you wish to make a statement? Jiho looked at Hana, who nodded encouragement. He stepped forward slightly. Honored council members, he began, his voice shaking only a little. I didn't mean to cause alarm. I was just trying to answer my exam questions completely. I promise that humans are not dangerous. We're just different. That difference is what concerns us, said Representative Coles, a Keelar elder with deep purple skin. Please remain silent while we review the evidence. The holographic display began to play. Jiho watched himself on the recording, asking his innocent question about edible or militarized plants. He watched the other students' reactions. He saw Professor Velk's colors change from calm blue to shocked transparency. As the recording played, Jiho noticed something. The council members were taking notes, but they also kept glancing at each other with expressions of growing concern. This was worse than he thought. The recording finished playing. The council chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Representative Cole spoke, his voice grave and serious. The evidence is clear. The human student spoke casually about consuming neurotoxins, paralytic agents, and pain-inducing compounds. He also demonstrated knowledge of weaponizing these substances. This suggests either profound recklessness or concerning military predisposition in the human species. Several council members made gestures of agreement. One Orthan representative actually developed a crack in her crystalline structure, a sign of extreme stress. Medical personnel had to escort her out of the chamber. Hana stood straighter, her diplomatic training taking over. Honored Council, I request permission to provide context for what you have witnessed. Chancellor Pren gestured with 2 of her 6 arms. Permission granted, Liaison Hana. Please help us understand. Thank you, Chancellor. Hana activated her own datapad, and a holographic image of Earth appeared above the central platform. The blue and green planet rotated slowly, looking peaceful and beautiful. This is Earth, Hana began, the human homeworld. Before I explain what student Jiho said, you need to understand where humans come from. She expanded the hologram to show Earth's classification data. Several council members leaned forward to read it. Jiho saw their reactions immediately. Colors changed. Eyes widened. Several members made distressed sounds. Class 7 Death World? Asked a Vryn representative, her voice rising with alarm. That classification is reserved for planets with extreme hostile conditions. Correct, Hana confirmed. Earth scores high in nearly every danger category. Extreme weather variations, tectonic instability, dangerous solar radiation levels, and most significantly, an ecosystem filled with organisms that evolved specifically to kill other organisms. She changed the hologram to show various Earth creatures. A great white shark appeared first, its rows of teeth visible as it swam through dark water. Several council members recoiled. This is a great white shark, Hana explained. It can smell blood from kilometers away and has a bite force strong enough to cut through bone. Humans swim in the same oceans as these creatures, sometimes on purpose for recreation. The next image showed a saltwater crocodile, then a box jellyfish, then a poison dart frog, its bright blue skin glistening with toxins, then a grizzly bear, standing 3 meters tall with claws like knives. Are all of these organisms from the same planet? Chancellor Pren asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Sora said, stepping forward to join Hana. And humans didn't just survive alongside these creatures. We became the dominant species. We outcompeted them all. Taiyang activated another display, this one showing extinct species. Many of these dangerous animals no longer exist because humans were better at survival than they were. Humans are apex persistence predators. We can track prey for days without stopping. We can survive injuries that would kill most other species. Our bodies are designed for endurance and adaptability. The council members looked disturbed by this information. Jiho understood why. Most spacefaring species came from relatively peaceful worlds. They evolved intelligence as their primary defense. Humans had evolved intelligence on top of already being dangerous predators. This explains the predatory nature, Representative Coles said slowly. But what about the toxins? Why would humans consume poison? Hana smiled slightly, though there was no humor in it. Because on Earth, if something doesn't kill you quickly, humans try to figure out how to eat it. We're opportunistic omnivores. We evolved to eat almost anything organic. She brought up images of various plants. These are almonds in their natural state. They contain cyanide, a deadly poison. Over thousands of years, humans bred them to produce less toxin so we could eat them safely. But even modern almonds still contain trace amounts. The next image showed potatoes. These are potatoes. The green parts contain solanine, a toxic glycoalkaloid. Humans learned to remove the green parts and cook the rest. Potatoes are now one of our staple foods. More images appeared. Cassava root, which required extensive processing to remove cyanide. Kidney beans, toxic when raw but safe when properly cooked. Rhubarb leaves, deadly poisonous while the stalks were edible. Nutmeg, which could cause hallucinations in high doses. You didn't avoid poisonous plants, Chancellor Pren said quietly. You conquered them. Yes, Sora confirmed. Because on Earth, if we had only eaten plants that were completely safe, we would have starved. So we developed preparation techniques, cooking methods, and fermentation processes. We turned deadly plants into food through knowledge and determination. Jiho finally spoke up, his voice clearer now. That's why the exam confused me. When I see a poisonous plant, my brain automatically starts thinking about how to process it safely. It's not malicious. It's survival instinct from a very hostile environment. Taeyang continued the presentation, moving to cultural practices. But it goes beyond simple survival. Humans actually seek out these experiences. The capsaicin that Jiho mentioned doesn't just cause pain. It triggers endorphin release in human brains. We've turned poison consumption into a cultural practice. He showed images of various spicy foods from around the world. Korean kimchi, Mexican habanero peppers, Indian vindaloo, Thai bird's eye chilies. Then he showed competitive eating contests where humans deliberately consumed increasingly concentrated capsaicin compounds. There are humans who compete to see who can tolerate the most pain from these compounds, Taeyang explained. It's considered entertainment. The council members looked horrified. One representative stood up. This is voluntary self-harm for recreational purposes. This suggests psychological instability, or remarkable pain tolerance and a sophisticated understanding of our own biochemistry, Hana countered firmly. Humans evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill us. We survived by being incredibly adaptable, and by refusing to accept that anything was simply impossible. She pulled up another set of data. Humans also consume ethanol, alcohol. It's a cellular toxin that damages the liver and brain. We evolved enzymes specifically to metabolize it, because fermented fruits were a food source. Then we turned accidental consumption into deliberate social practice. We've been brewing alcoholic beverages for over 10,000 years. Why? Representative Coles asked, genuinely confused. Why would an intelligent species continue to consume something harmful? Because the harm is manageable, and the social benefits outweighed the risks, Hana said. Because humans don't just think about immediate danger. We think about long-term advantages. Alcohol sterilizes water. It preserves food. It has medicinal properties. Yes, it's dangerous in excess, but humans learned to use it carefully. Jiho took a breath and stepped forward again. And that's why I mentioned military applications. Because yes, humans have weaponized toxic plants, but we've also turned them into medicines. The same compounds we used on arrow tips we now use to treat disease. Sora brought up medical data. Digitalis from foxglove treats heart conditions. Atropine from deadly nightshade counteracts nerve agents and treats certain medical emergencies. Vincristine from periwinkle helps fight cancer. Aspirin comes from willow bark and was used for pain relief for thousands of years before we understood the chemistry. We learned to harness poisons for healing, Taeyang added. Every human medical advance came from understanding dangerous substances and finding ways to use them safely. The chamber was quiet as the council members absorbed this information. Nara, the Kilar student who had been allowed to observe, sent a telepathic message to the entire council. Jiho felt it brush against his mind, though it wasn't directed at him. "I've been listening to their thoughts during this presentation," Nara's mental voice said. "They're not lying. They're not trying to intimidate. They genuinely see this as normal. To them, danger is just another problem to solve." Chancellor Pren stood slowly, all 6 arms moving in a gesture that indicated deep thought. "These humans are not predators who learned science. They're survivors who refuse to accept limits." She looked at Professor Velk. "Professor, your concern was that humans posed a danger to the Institute. Do you still hold this position?" Professor Velk's colors shifted through several patterns: orange confusion, yellow fear, but gradually settling into a warm gold that indicated something new. Respect mixed with residual concern. "I believe," he said carefully, "that humans are dangerous in the same way that a plasma cutter is dangerous. Not inherently malicious, but requiring careful understanding and appropriate precautions. The danger comes from misunderstanding their nature, not from malicious intent." "A fair assessment," Chancellor Pren said. The council deliberated for 3 full days. During that time, Jiho, Sora, and Taiyang were confined to their dormitory quarters. They could attend classes remotely, but were not allowed in common areas. Security personnel stood outside their doors, though they were polite and professional about it. Jiho spent most of that time feeling guilty. He sat on his bed working through practice problems for his other classes, but his mind kept returning to the hearing. He had caused an interstellar incident by being careless with his words. His parents had been so proud when he was accepted to the Institute. Now he might get expelled or worse, cause problems for all of humanity's relationship with the galactic community. On the 2nd day, Nara visited him. The Kilar student stood in his doorway, her large eyes reflecting concern. The security guard had allowed her through after checking her credentials. "How are you holding up?" she asked, sitting in the chair near his desk. "I've been better," Jiho admitted. "Have you heard anything? What are people saying?" Nara was quiet for a moment, and Jiho felt the soft touch of her telepathic mind brushing against his. She was checking his emotional state, something Quilar did naturally with people they cared about. "Opinions are divided," she said finally. "Some students are scared. They think humans are dangerous and shouldn't be allowed at the Institute. But others are curious. The recording of your exam question has spread across the entire galactic network. Edible or militarized has become a popular phrase." "Great," Jiho said, dropping his head into his hands. "I'm a meme." "Actually, it's more interesting than that," Nara continued. She pulled up her datapad and showed him various social media posts from different species. "Look at this." A Vrin pharmaceutical researcher watched the hearing recordings and realized that human toxin-resistant studies could revolutionize medicine. She's filed a formal research proposal. She scrolled to another post. "And here, an Orthan military strategist who previously dismissed human tactical contributions has requested consultation on defensive countermeasures. Your presentation about weaponizing plants made him rethink his assumptions about resource utilization." Jiho looked at the posts with surprise. "They're not all negative?" "No," Nara said with something that might have been a smile. "Many scientists are excited. You've shown them a completely different way of thinking about hostile environments. For millions of years, most species have solved problems by avoiding danger. Humans solved problems by confronting danger and turning it into tools." "I didn't mean to revolutionize anything," Jiho said quietly. "I just wanted to pass my exam." "I know," Nara replied. "That's what makes it more impressive. This way of thinking is so natural to you that you didn't even realize it was unusual." On the 3rd day, the council reached their decision. The 3 human students were summoned back to the council chamber along with Hana. This time, the atmosphere felt different. Less hostile, more curious, the council members watched them enter with expressions that were difficult to read. Chancellor Pren stood, and the chamber fell silent. She looked at each of the humans in turn, her compound eyes taking in every detail. This council has spent 3 days reviewing evidence, consulting with experts, and debating the implications of human biology and culture. We have reached several conclusions. Jiho held his breath. Beside him, Sora grabbed his hand and squeezed it. First, Chancellor Pren continued, we find that student Jiho and his fellow humans acted without malicious intent. The incident resulted from genuine biological and cultural differences, not from any desire to threaten or intimidate other species. Relief flooded through Jiho. But the Chancellor wasn't finished. Second, we conclude that the galactic community has been negligent in understanding Deathworld species, particularly humans. We have applied our own evolutionary framework to species that evolved under completely different conditions. This is intellectually lazy and potentially dangerous. Several council members made gestures of agreement. Professor Velk's colors shifted to a thoughtful purple. Third, and most significantly, we recognize that human perspective, while initially alarming, offers valuable insights that the galactic community currently lacks. As we expand into increasingly hostile territories, we will encounter environments similar to Earth. We need the expertise of species that evolved in such conditions. Chancellor Pren looked directly at Jiho and Professor Velk. Therefore, we are implementing several changes. All courses involving toxic materials, dangerous fauna, or extreme environment protocols will now require consultation with human experts. The Institute needs your perspective even when it makes us uncomfortable. Professor Velk's colors brightened with surprise. Chancellor, I'm honored, but I'm not certain I'm qualified to. You are being assigned a co-chair, the Chancellor interrupted. Student Jiho, effective immediately. You will work alongside Professor Velk to develop a new curriculum. You will help teach other species how to think about hostile environments the way humans do. Jiho's mouth fell open. Me, but I'm just a student. I still have 2 years of courses to complete. You will complete them while teaching, Chancellor Pren said firmly. We're establishing a new field of study, Deathworld Survival Sciences. Your practical knowledge combined with Professor Velk's academic expertise will create a program that benefits the entire galactic community. Sora and Taeyang both looked stunned. Hana smiled, though she also looked exhausted. She had probably been negotiating these terms for 3 days straight. There's one more thing, the Chancellor added. We're instituting a cultural exchange program. Human students will teach other species about Earth survival strategies. In return, you will learn from species who evolved different solutions to universal problems. Cooperation across different evolutionary backgrounds is valuable, precisely because it's difficult. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some members clearly disagreed with the decision, but others looked excited. Representative Coles, the Quelar elder, raised one hand for attention. I have a question for the humans, he said. If humans find our normal precautions excessive, and if you see danger as opportunity, how do we ensure safety in shared environments? How do we work together when our baseline assumptions about danger are so different? It was Sora who answered, with communication and respect. Just because humans can tolerate capsaicin doesn't mean we serve spicy food to species who can't. Just because we understand weaponization doesn't mean we're comfortable with weapons everywhere. Humans adapt. That's what we do best. We've spent thousands of years learning to live with each other on Earth, Taeyang added. Different cultures, different tolerances, different perspectives. We developed systems to accommodate everyone. We can do the same here. Jiho found his voice again. And honestly, learning from you is just as valuable to us. Humans are good at confronting danger, but you're good at avoiding unnecessary risk. That's wisdom, not weakness. Working together means we all become better. Professor Velk's colors shifted to that warm gold again. A Deathworld species teaching the galaxy about cooperation and mutual respect. There's an irony there that I appreciate. Humans are full of contradictions, Jiho said with a slight smile. We're the species that turned poison into food, weapons into medicine, and the deadliest planet in the sector into home. We're very good at irony. The council session ended with formal documentation of the new policies. As they left the chamber, students from various species waited outside. Some kept their distance, still wary, but others approached with questions. A young Orthan student, her crystalline body showing nervous yellow colors, addressed Jiho directly. Is it true that humans eat something called ghost pepper that measures over 1 million Scoville units? Jiho nodded. Some people do. I tried one once. It was a terrible decision, but I survived. Why would you do something that painful? The student asked, genuinely confused. Honestly, because it was there and I was curious. Humans are very curious, sometimes to our own detriment. The Orthan student's colors shifted to fascinated orange. Could you teach me more about this? About how humans think about danger? That's literally going to be my job now, Jiho said, still somewhat amazed by the turn of events. Come to the first session next week. Bring questions. Bring skepticism. Bring curiosity. We'll figure this out together. 6 months passed, and the Intergalactic Xenobiology Institute transformed in ways nobody had anticipated. The new Death World Survival Sciences program attracted students from across the galaxy, all eager to understand how humans thought about danger and survival. Jiho stood at the front of a lecture hall, a holographic display showing various poisonous plants rotating above the podium. The hall was packed with students from 15 different species, all taking notes on their datapads. Professor Velk sat in the front row, his crystalline body glowing a pleased blue color. "So when you look at this plant," Jiho said, gesturing to a particularly nasty specimen with purple thorns, "what do you see?" A Vrin student raised 2 of her 6 arms. "I see a neurotoxin delivery system with multiple redundant defense mechanisms. Highly dangerous. Avoid at all costs." "Good assessment," Jiho confirmed. "That's the standard galactic safety approach, and it's completely valid. Who else has a different perspective?" An Orthan student, the same one who had approached him after the council hearing, changed to a thoughtful orange. "I see a potential pharmaceutical resource. The neurotoxin might have medical applications if properly isolated and controlled." "Excellent," Jiho said with a smile. "You're thinking about applications, not just dangers." "Anyone else?" Nara, who had officially joined the program as a teaching assistant, used her telepathy to project a thought to the whole class. "I see a challenge. Something that evolved to be dangerous but could potentially be useful. The question isn't whether it's dangerous, it clearly is. The question is whether that danger can be managed or transformed." "Perfect," Jiho said. "That's the key to Death World thinking. Danger isn't the end of the analysis. It's the beginning. Now let me show you what humans did with plants like this on Earth." He brought up images of careful cultivation and selective breeding. He showed the 1,000-year process of turning wild, toxic plants into safe food sources. He explained the development of preparation techniques, fermentation processes, and cooking methods that neutralized poisons while preserving nutrition. The students listened with fascination. Some took extensive notes. Others asked questions that showed they were truly grasping the concept. A few still looked uncomfortable, but they were trying to understand. And that was what mattered. After the lecture, Professor Velk approached Jiho in his small office, really just a converted storage room, but it had a window with a view of the stars, which Jiho loved. "You're a natural teacher," Professor Velk said, his colors warm and approving. "The students respond well to you." "I think they respond to the novelty," Jiho replied, organizing his notes. "I'm still surprised the council approved this whole program." "I'm not," the professor said. "You've given the galactic community something it didn't know it needed: perspective. For millions of years, most spacefaring species solved problems by minimizing risk. You've shown us that sometimes the solution involves engaging with risk in controlled ways." There was a knock on the door. Sora and Taiyang entered, both looking excited. "You need to see this," Sora said, pulling up something on her datapad. "The Vrin Pharmaceutical Company just published their first results using human toxin resistance models. They've developed a new treatment for cellular degeneration that wouldn't have been possible without understanding how human bodies process and survive toxins. And look at this," Taiyang added, showing a different report. 3 terraforming projects have requested human consultants. They're working on planets that were previously classified as too hostile for colonization. With human survival strategies, they think they can make those worlds habitable." Jiho read through the reports with growing amazement. All this from one exam question? All this from a different way of thinking, Professor Velk corrected. "You didn't invent danger, Jiho. You just showed us that danger could be transformed into opportunity. That's revolutionary." Later that evening, Jiho walked through the Institute's common areas. The atmosphere had changed dramatically over the past 6 months. The cafeteria now offered optional human spice levels for adventurous students. A small but growing number of aliens had tried Earth hot sauce. Most regretted it immediately, but it had become a rite of passage, a way of showing you were brave enough to experience what humans considered normal. He found Nara in the observation lounge, looking out at the stars. She turned when she sensed his approach, her telepathic mind reaching out in friendly greeting. "How are you feeling?" she asked as he sat beside her. "Overwhelmed," Jiho admitted. 6 months ago I was just trying to pass an exam. Now I'm supposedly changing how the galaxy thinks about hostile environments." "You're not changing how the galaxy thinks," Nara said gently. "You're adding to how the galaxy thinks. There's a difference." The old safety-focused approach isn't wrong. It saved countless lives. But your approach, the human approach, offers new possibilities. She projected a telepathic image directly into his mind. A vast web of different species, each contributing their own unique perspectives and strengths, all connected and supporting each other. That's what the galactic community is supposed to be, she continued. Not everyone thinking the same way, but everyone thinking differently and sharing those differences. You've reminded us of that, Jiho smiled. When you explain it like that, it sounds almost profound. It is profound, Nara insisted. Do you know how many research papers have been published in the last 6 months that cite your work? How many students have changed their career paths because of your lectures? How many lives might be saved because humans taught us to see danger differently? I don't want to think about it, Jiho said honestly. The pressure would be too much. Then don't think of it as pressure. Think of it as conversation. You're just talking to people, showing them your perspective. They take from it what they need. The door opened and several students entered the observation lounge. They saw Jiho and waved enthusiastically. One of them, a young Quilar, approached nervously. Instructor Jiho, I have a question about next week's assignment. I'm not technically an instructor, Jiho said, though he'd given up really fighting the title. But sure, what's your question? You asked us to identify a dangerous plant from our own homeworld and analyze it using human survival thinking. I found one, but I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. Could you look? The student showed him a holographic image of a plant from the Quilar homeworld. It produced spores that caused temporary paralysis in most species. Jiho studied it carefully. Okay, so what did you come up with? Well, the student said hesitantly, the paralytic compound might be useful for surgical anesthesia if properly controlled, and the spore dispersal mechanism could be adapted for targeted medical delivery systems. But I feel like I'm thinking like a human, not like myself. Jiho shook his head. You're thinking like yourself with new tools. That's the point. You don't have to become human to benefit from human perspective. You just have to expand your own perspective to include new possibilities. But what if those possibilities are dangerous? All new possibilities are dangerous, Jiho replied. That's not a reason to avoid them. It's a reason to approach them carefully, thoughtfully, and with good safety protocols. The goal isn't to eliminate danger. The goal is to understand it well enough to work with it safely. The student's expression brightened. I think I understand now. Thank you, instructor. After the student left, Jiho turned back to Nara with an exhausted smile. See what I mean about overwhelming? You're doing important work, Nara said. Important work is often overwhelming. I keep waiting for someone to realize I'm just making this up as I go, Jiho admitted. I'm not a survival expert. I'm not a teacher. I'm just a guy who grew up on Earth and thought the exam questions seemed familiar. That's exactly why you're perfect for this, Nara replied. You're not trying to impress anyone or prove anything. You're just being honest about your experience. That honesty is what makes your teaching effective. 3 months later, Jiho stood before a much larger audience. The Institute was hosting a galactic symposium on extreme environment research, and he had been asked to give the opening address. Hundreds of scientists, diplomats, and educators from across the galaxy filled the auditorium. Jiho recognized several prominent researchers, including the Vrin pharmaceutical scientist who had used human toxin models in her work. He took a breath and began his presentation. The holographic display behind him showed a simple image, that same purple thorny plant from his original exam. 8 months ago, Jiho said, I was taking a test. One of the questions showed a poisonous plant, and I asked my professor a simple question. Should I evaluate this plant for edible preparation or military application? A ripple of recognition went through the audience. Many of them had seen the recording. That question caused an interstellar incident because it revealed a fundamental difference in how humans think about danger compared to most other species. Today, I want to talk about why that difference matters and what we can learn from each other. He spoke for 40 minutes, weaving together stories of human survival with insights from other species. He explained how humans didn't have a monopoly on adapting to danger. Every species had its own methods. The Orthans could analyze threats through light refraction patterns